a dire warning from Defense Secretary James Mattis that North Korea should cease any consideration of actions that would lead to the end of its regime and the destruction of its people.
미국이 새롭게 고안해내고 감행하려는 도발적인 예방전쟁에는 미국 본토를 포함한 적들의 모든 아성을 성들의채 없애버리는.
Let's see what he does with Guam. He does something in Guam, it will be an event the likes of which nobody's seen before. What will happen in North Korea?
It will be an event the likes of which nobody's seen before.
In Japan, Trump's words came on the anniversary of the American atomic bomb in Nagasaki, a reminder of what's at stake.
At the same time, the Secretary of State tried to reassure Americans and the world that we are not on the brink of nuclear war.
To cease any consideration of actions that would lead to the end of its regime and the destruction of its people. That doomsday warning came a day after North Korea threatened to rain nuclear missiles on the American air base on the Pacific island of Guam. The governor of Guam tried to assure residents the island is American territory and will be protected by the American military.
I've reached out to the White House this morning. An attack or threat on Guam is a threat or attack on the United States.
North Korea made the threat after B-1 bombers had flown from Guam over the Korean peninsula in what has become a standard show of force in response to North Korea's missile tests. Returning from Asia, Secretary of State Tillerson was asked if Americans should be worried.
I think Americans should sleep well at night.
Mattis issued his warning shortly before touring the USS Kentucky, a ballistic missile submarine which by itself could annihilate North Korea. Last summer, 60 Minutes went aboard the Kentucky on patrol in the Pacific. It can carry almost 200 nuclear warheads atop the missiles loaded beneath those hatches. Commander Brian Freck was the captain.
The warheads that can be carried on my missiles are extremely powerful.
And compare them to the bomb that leveled Hiroshima.
Much more powerful than that. Much more powerful than Hiroshima.
100 feet, 8-4.
And on any given day, several of these submarines are hiding somewhere in the world's oceans.
Chief Lawat, sound the general alarm.
Sound the general alarm, right, sir.
I have permission to fire. Con weapons on.
Drilling to respond to a launch order from the president.
Pentagon officials say no new military orders have been issued despite the warlike rhetoric on both sides, but they warn tensions are likely to remain high since the U.S. is scheduled to conduct an annual military exercise in South Korea later this month. Anthony?
David, I understand the North Korean government has just issued another statement with yet another warning, another threat to the United States.
This is a brand new statement, Wolf, coming out just before the president's latest remarks, but I want to just read this to you. North Korean officials are saying the U.S., quote, would suffer a shameful defeat and final doom if it persists in extreme military adventure, sanctions, and pressure. Now, this is issued by state news agency KCNA, quoting Minister Chae Poo-il, who it says is director of the Political Bureau of the Korean People's Internal Security Forces. The statement also goes on to say that officials, quote, have vowed to mercilessly wipe out the provocateurs, making desperate efforts to stifle the socialist country. And again, this is new, but this is out before this latest press conference from President Trump, because we know that North Korea, when they put out their messaging in response to what the United States says, it often can take up to 24 hours because so many people have to sign off on it. So this is from yesterday. Now we still have to wait to see how they're going to respond to what they said today.
North Korea. President Trump warning the regime today against making any more threats toward the U.S., with that promise that the U.S. would unleash fire and fury, the likes of which the world has never seen. It comes after U.S. intelligence determined North Korea's weapons program has now reached a dangerous milestone. ABC's chief global affairs correspondent Martha Raddatz tonight with President Trump's entire statement on camera, his warning to North Korea.
It is the most fiery, overtly military threat President Trump has ever launched at North Korea, a chilling warning in response to Kim Jong-un's threats to the U.S.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen. He has been very threatening beyond a normal statement. And as I said, they will be met with fire, fury, and frankly, power, the likes of which this world has never seen before.
This dramatic escalation of rhetoric, all the more alarming given the latest extraordinary intelligence assessments of North Korea's nuclear capabilities. First reported in the Washington Post and confirmed by ABC News, U.S. intelligence analysts believe the North can now produce a miniaturized nuclear warhead that can fit inside its missiles, including its intercontinental ballistic missiles. Kim Jong-un's claim that he was standing next to such a nuclear device last March was met with some skepticism, but this latest intelligence assessment says he has indeed produced that device.
This is the most momentous day in his nuclear program.
Just 2 weeks ago, Kim tested an ICBM into space, going higher and farther than ever before. But analysts say if the missile trajectory was lowered, the missile could potentially reach the east coast of the United States, including New York and Washington, D.C.
There are still two pieces of the puzzle left. One is he has to show that he's able to have that nuclear warhead survive the heat of reentry. And the second is that he has to be able to accurately target it.
It is without question the greatest challenge President Trump now faces. And the president's tough new words,
fire, fury, and frankly, power,
come as Americans are worried about the North Korean threat, according to polls. Just days after the UN enacted strong sanctions, a CBS News poll found 61% of Americans are uneasy about President Trump's handling of North Korea.
And Martha Raddatz joins us from Washington tonight. And Martha, in addition to that miniature nuclear warhead, there were other alarming findings about North Korea in that intelligence report?
There certainly were, David. U.S. intelligence now believes North Korea has 60 nuclear weapons, a far greater number than they thought before, David.
Martha Raddatz leading us off tonight. Martha, thank you. I want to bring in retired Marine Colonel Stephen Ganyard tonight. And Colonel Ganyard, you heard what Martha reported right there, that U.S. intelligence now believes the North Koreans have produced a miniature nuclear warhead that can actually fit inside that missile. That was the major concern, was it not? And what's the defense?
It was, David, because miniaturizing a nuclear weapon was arguably the hardest part of him developing a nuclear capability. Look at this. This is what's called a ground-based interceptor. If U.S. radars were able to detect a North Korean launch, missiles would be launched from Alaska and California, fly up into outer space. They'd be able to tell the difference between a decoy warhead and the warhead itself. They would intercept it like a bullet on bullet and prevent that nuclear warhead from hitting the United States.
That is certainly the hope of how it would play out. Colonel Ganyard, let me ask you this, too. The president's words promising fire and fury like the world has never seen. Afterward, Kellyanne Conway saying the president's rhetoric essentially speaks for itself, calling it strong and obvious. What did you think as you heard it?
David, this has been the de facto policy of the United States since President Eisenhower. But to hear this kind of language out of a U.S. president, it's something we've never heard before, and it certainly puts the
reaction in Asia to the growing tension between the U.S. and North Korea. Ben Tracy has that.
South Korea's president says he will now allow the U.S. to fully deploy the anti-ballistic missile system known as THAAD in his country. It comes as Moon Jae-in is also calling for a complete overhaul of South Korea's military. President Trump's fire and fury comments led to a large protest march in North Korea, orchestrated by the regime. In Japan, Trump's words came on the anniversary of the American atomic bomb in Nagasaki, a reminder of what's at stake. Japan's lawmakers are pushing for new weapons that could allow it to launch a preemptive strike on North Korea. China is warning both Kim Jong-un's regime and the U.S. to tone down the rhetoric. In a statement to CBS News, China's foreign ministry called the situation highly sensitive and that all sides should stop provoking each other. China does not want North Korea to have nuclear weapons, but says the problem should be solved diplomatically. It fears a war on the Korean peninsula could lead to a refugee crisis along the nearly 900-mile border it shares with North Korea. Next week, North Korea celebrates its Liberation Day holiday, which some analysts believe could lead Kim Jong-un to launch another missile or conduct a sixth underground nuclear test.
Now, North Korea just released a new statement, and in it they say that President Trump, quote, let out a load of nonsense about fire and fury, and that dialogue is not possible with such a guy bereft of reason. It appears North Korea is not yet ready to talk.
미국이 새롭게 고안해내고 감행하려는 도발적인 예방 전쟁에는 미국 본토를 포함한 적들의 모든 아성을 성들이채 없애버리는
issued a new threat to attack the American territory of Guam after a stern warning from President Trump. The regime says it could use missiles to create an enveloping fire over the western Pacific island.
The U.S. territory, just over 2,000 miles from North Korea, is home to 162,000 people. More than 6,000 American troops are stationed there. Two B-1 bombers based in Guam flew over the Korean peninsula in a show of force.
They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
Very fierce and threatening response to President Trump's remarks when President Trump threatened to unleash fire and fury on North Korea. We knew that this was coming, but this is a very strongly worded warning from KCNA, the North Korean state media, Wolf. They call President Trump's remarks a load of nonsense. They say that President Trump fails to grasp the gravity of the situation on the Korean Peninsula, and this really stands out. They say that dialogue, they believe dialogue will not work with the U.S. president, that only absolute force will work. I want to read to you a portion of this because they actually detail their plan for an attack on Guam, the island that contains key U.S. military assets. It says here, quote, as already clarified, the strategic force of the KPA is seriously examining the plan for an enveloping strike at Guam through simultaneous fire of 4 Hwasong-12 intermediate-range strategic ballistic rockets in order to interdict the enemy forces on major military bases in Guam and to signal a crucial warning to the U.S. So they're targeting the Naval Base Guam, Anderson Air Force Base, the Coast Guard Station, more than 6,000 U.S. troops and more than 160,000 American citizens living on that island, along with an estimated 10,000 tourists. The island packed right now with tourists, and North Korea now issuing this direct threat as a result of
Americans should sleep well at night. I have no concerns about this particular rhetoric of the last few days.
Homeland Security, the Rear Admiral, and the United States to ensure our safety. And I want to reassure the people of Guam that currently there is no threat to our island.
How concerning is it that Donald Trump seems to be upping his rhetoric about some sort of action against North Korea?
Look, I think the comments are not helpful in an environment that's very tense.
The United Kingdom stands shoulder to shoulder with the United States in tackling this threat and many others. We are united in calling on the North Korean regime to halt its nuclear program.
Verfolgen die zunehmende rhetorische Eskalation rund die koreanische Halbinsel mit größter Sorge. Die Lage ist wirklich ernst. Ein weiteres Säbelrasseln
A dire warning from Defense Secretary James Mattis that North Korea should cease any consideration of actions that would lead to the end of its regime and the destruction of its people. War-like language. Mattis also telling the world North Korea's military will continue to be grossly overmatched by ours and would lose any arms race or conflict. A very different tone than Mattis's previous statements, emphasizing diplomacy and what war would mean for South Korea.
It will involve the massive shelling of an ally's capital, which is one of the most densely packed cities on Earth. It would be a war that fundamentally we don't want.
Kim Jong-un's regime undeterred.
Any plans to execute the preventive war devised by the U.S. would be met with an all-out war, wiping out all the strongholds of enemies, including the U.S. mainland.
All of this after North Korea threatened to attack Guam, a U.S. territory in the Western Pacific, where U.S. bombers are based and other aircraft that could be used to attack his regime.
He has been very threatening beyond a normal state.
Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says Trump's warning would hopefully keep Kim from reacting.
I think it was important that he deliver that message to avoid any miscalculation on their part.
If Tillerson was playing good cop, Mattis and the president were not.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
The commander of U.S. missile defenses told CNN the U.S. can defend against North Korean missiles today and in the future.
We can deal with the current threat as presented today. As the threat matures, we have a plan in place to mature our capabilities to deal with that threat.
The Secretary of State still trying to reassure.
Nothing that I have seen and nothing that I know of would indicate that the situation has dramatically changed in the last 24 hours. I think Americans should sleep well at night.
Yesterday that your statement on Tuesday was nonsense. That's the word that they used. Do you have any response to that?
Well, I don't think they mean that, and I think it's the first time they've heard it like they heard it. And frankly, the people that were questioning that statement, was it too tough? Maybe it wasn't tough enough. They've been doing this to our country for a long time, for many years. And it's about time that somebody stuck up for the people of this country and for the people of other countries. So, if anything, maybe that statement wasn't tough enough. And we're backed by 100% by our military. We're backed by everybody. And we're backed by many other leaders. And I noticed that many senators and others today came out very much in favor of what I said. But if anything, that statement may not be tough enough.
What would be tougher than fire and fury?
Well, you'll see. You'll see.
Mr. President, is one of the options being considered a preemptive strike, first strike?
We don't talk about that. I never do. I'm not like the other administration that would say we're going into Mosul in 4 months. I don't talk about it. We'll see what happens. But I can tell you that what they've been doing and what they've been getting away with is a tragedy, and it can't be allowed. Sure, we'll always consider negotiations, but they've been negotiating now for 25 years. Look at Clinton. He folded on the negotiations. He disrespected our country greatly. He has said things that are horrific. And with me, he's not getting away with it. He got away with it for a long time between him and his family. He's not getting away with it. It's a whole new ballgame. And he's not going to be saying those things, and he's certainly not going to be doing those things. I read about we're in Guam by August 15th. Let's see what he does with Guam. He does something in Guam, it will be an event the likes of which nobody's seen before, what will happen in North Korea.
And when you say that, what do you mean?
You'll see. You'll see. And he'll see. He will see. It's not a dare. It's a statement. Has nothing to do with dare. That's a statement. He's not going to go around threatening Guam, and he's not going to threaten the United States, and he's not going to threaten Japan, and he's not going to threaten South Korea. No, that's not a dare, as you say. That is a statement of fact. Number one, I would like to denuke the world. I know that President Obama said global warming is the biggest threat. I totally disagree. I say that it's a simple one. Nuclear is our greatest threat worldwide. Not even a question, not even close. So I'd like to de-nuke the world. I would like Russia and the United States and China and Pakistan and many other countries that have nuclear weapons, get rid of them. But until such time as they do, we will be the most powerful nuclear nation on Earth by far. The first order I gave to my generals, as you know, Mike, my first order was I want our nuclear arsenal to be the biggest and the finest in the world. And we spent a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of effort. And it's in tip-top shape and getting better and getting stronger. And until such time as this scourge disappears, we will be so much better and so much stronger than anybody else. And nobody, including North Korea, is going to be threatening us with anything.
And North Korea exchanged new warnings today. The North threatening again to attack Guam, and the U.S. warning of a response that would knock out the communist regime and destroy its people. At the same time, the Secretary of State tried to reassure Americans and the world that we are not on the brink of nuclear war. It all began yesterday with a statement from the president that caught everyone, including his top advisors, off guard. Here's Chief White House correspondent Major Garrett.
Faced with new evidence of North Korea's nuclear progress and knowing the president had grown weary of diplomatic niceties, his national security advisors agreed on a tough statement. They didn't expect this.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
Today, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said advisors were aware of the president's tone beforehand, but, quote, the words were his own. It was left to Secretary of State Rex Tillerson to explain the comments. Speaking while flying to Guam for a previously scheduled refueling stop, Tillerson said Mr. Trump was trying to get the attention of North Korea's young dictator, who just yesterday threatened the American territory.
What the president was doing is sending a strong message to North Korea in language that Kim Jong-un would understand, because he doesn't seem to understand diplomatic language.
Initial congressional reaction was critical of the president's fire and fury language. But supportive voices emerged today, including Republican Senator Marco Rubio.
I don't think the rhetoric is the problem. I think the problem is there's a lunatic in North Korea with nuclear weapons.
Today, the president tweeted that he had ordered a modernization of the U.S. nuclear arsenal and touted its unmatched power. In fact, it was President Obama who directed billions over many years to improve aging nuclear weapons and delivery and targeting systems.
Acts have just proved to be quite costly to the regime. This resolution is the single largest economic sanctions package ever leveled against the North Korean regime. The price the North Korean leadership will pay for its continued nuclear and missile development will be the loss of 1/3 of its exports and hard currency. This is the most stringent set of sanctions on any country in a generation. These sanctions will cut deep, and in doing so will give the North Korean leadership a taste of the deprivation they have chosen to inflict on the North Korean people. We had tough negotiations this week, but as I said on Monday, the time for talking was over, the time for action had begun, and I appreciate China and their cooperation in terms of really getting into these negotiations and saying enough is enough. North Korea needs to take heed that the international community has spoken with one voice. They have the option to stop what they're doing. They have the option of stopping the reckless and the irresponsible behavior, and the international community could not have made a stronger point to tell them that the time to stop is now, and we are prepared to continue on if we have to.